Before this video begins, I'd just like to thank you all for sticking around for 10 years. That's right. I've been doing this for 10 years. And I'm only just now making stuff I actually want to make. Holy moly. I'd also like to thank you guys for watching this video on the upload date instead of playing Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, because trust me, I know it's hard to avoid that game. And also, mad respects to you if you've gone past those temptations. You could not have asked for a worst possible day for that game to come out. Outside of that, if you want more fact-related shenanigans, I have another video on this channel, which this is a sequel to. It's called 34 Facts About the SpongeBob's SquarePants movie video game. And if you want to watch the video that inspired that, head over to my modding friend Gravity's channel, where he did a video about 50 facts about BFBB. He's also doing a sequel to that video sometime soon, so I'd keep a lookout for that. Whenever it comes out, it'll actually be added in this video's end slate. So that being said, on with the video. Hey, how's it going? It's me, the
name and address withheld.
And you may remember a while ago, I did a video talking about 34 facts about the SpongeBob's SquarePants movie game. That video was a spiritual successor to Gravity's 50 facts about BFBB. And as I stated in that movie facts video, I did not have time to get 50 of those things. Well, I liked making that video, and you guys clearly liked it too. I believe during that video, I ended up promising a video about beta content for that game, as well as SpongeBob's Truth or Square. However, I ended up deciding against it, instead wanting to focus on the legacy of BFBB more. And I also said in that video's comment section that instead of doing that initial follow-up, I was going to do a more direct one, focusing on facts for SpongeBob's Truth or Square. However, much unlike the movie game, I've played damn near every version of this game that exists on the planet, except that one Flash version, but we don't count that one. Well, since I happen to have experience with all three main versions, that means we're going to be looking at all three. I still don't have a PSP copy. That means we're going to be looking at all three versions, which in turn means we got a lot more facts. But how many exactly is a lot more? Well, let's go ahead and find out right now. Okay, so this one's gonna be a bit different from movie facts. First of all, we got, obviously, 150 of the damn things. Second of all, because there's so many, we're actually going to start with more miscellaneous facts, such as global stuff. We're doing that first, so that way when it comes time to talk about level facts, I don't have to explain X thing while talking about a level, when in reality, it would just be easier to explain it during a miscellaneous portion. So that being said, let's not waste any further time and get right into this. The robots have names that can only be seen in the files, with the exception of one of them. The Slammer Dude is called a Basic Hammer. Spinner Dude is Basic Spin. Yellow Slammer Dude is Basic Hammer Hard. Yellow Spinner Dude is Basic Spin Hard. Big Spinner Dude is Charger 1 Spin. The Shooty Boys are called Turret 2. Turret 1 appears to have a texture in the game, but it appears to just be Turret 2's texture without a red eye, possibly a PSP/DS remnant. The giant spinners you see in the environment are called environmental spinners. Can't say I'm shocked about that one. The digging enemies are called gopher pucks. The DS exclusive enemy that functions like the digging enemy, the one that looked like the mini Demento, is called a gopher spin. This was discovered because the enemy's texture is actually still present in the console version, likely due to their shrapnel being used for gopher puck. Their texture was also edited for Demento. The Big Hammer Boy is Charger 1 Hammer. The Yellow Shooter is a Turret 3. Internally, the Bomb Bot is just called Bomb. However, the game itself refers to it as Boom Bot. The Big Spinner Dude with propeller hands is Charger 2 Spin 1. The spawners are simply just called spawners. The Green and Red Big Hammer Dude, or red and yellow on 360, is called Charger 2 Hammer 1. The big spinner dude with propeller hands that only appeared in cutscenes and the DS version is Charger 2 Spin 0. The bouncy boy from the handheld version and scrapped downtown level on console is just called a springboard. On the Nintendo DS version, every enemy has a weakness that kills them faster, and in some cases one-hit KOs them. For any enemy that slams, you shoot them with the cannon shot. For any enemy that spins, you use the spatula slam. For any enemy that shoots, you use the spin slap. The PSP version has voice lines that are entirely unique to it, at least as far as I'm aware.
You heard the man, Plankton? It's time to feed those anchovies. The only thing that can get between me and those anchovies' stomachs is...
A more specific example will be shown near the end of the video. The game's main collectibles, happiness nuggets and happiness objects, have different names on the DS version. The nuggets are called happy points, and the happiness objects are occasionally called memory item or happy memory. Brought to my attention by KHPro29 and Heavy Iron Modding, the music for the concept art is entirely different depending on which version you're playing. In the Wii version, each level has 3 that randomly have either the songs Warblowers, the slow version of 12th Street Rag, or Seaweed. But in the 360 and PSP versions, it's always in the same order. The only level to have this order on the Wii version is Fun Times Jellyfishing with Patrick. The Salesfish from the DS version was also supposed to appear on the console version, as a model of him does exist. However, due to me being bad and lazy at research, I could only find one image of him, which was on the SpongeBob wiki, because as we know, wikis are very valid sources of information. In this image, we also see Man Ray of all characters and Pearl. While I cannot verify the validity of this image because, again, SpongeBob wiki, and they also don't have a source on the image, we do know Pearl actually does exist in the game. She's in the Spanish Wii version. And as for these PSP enemies, these are very much not the compressed versions we see in-game. The Plankton ammo tokens that appear in multiplayer are referred to as Happy Token Side B in the files. SpongeBuff's arms are separate textures, meaning you can change how SpongeBuff looks via modding. You can go for an Anchor Arms look, or even go for some concept art vibes. The Kelp Traps has remnants of one of its beta designs in the texture, as its eye, seen in some of the early screenshots, can still be seen in the texture. However, the color of the eye itself is different. Despite what it may seem, the game is not mostly comprised of reused textures from BFBB and Movie. Nearly every texture has been repainted from the ground up. Keywords are mostly and nearly. These next 2 facts are some of the outliers when it comes to the game not actually reusing textures. To immediately contradict what I literally just said, the Mermaid computer either uses a modified or the exact same texture as the Duplicatotron from BFBB. This may also apply to the Mermaid computer in BFBB, and I'm just an idiot. Okay, Future Koopa here, this time through voiceover. Turns out, yes, I am lay dumb. However, when looking at these 2 side by side, it is pretty clear that a lot of the texture is just a straight rip. Some of it is repainted, that is true, but not all of it. The red monster in Rock Bottom appears to use the textures of not only the frogfish, but also the eye stalk monster from the movie game. The jelly that Patbot spills during his boss fight on PSP appears to actually be called candy, at least according to the truck here. SpongeBob can't fully stand still on any slope in the PSP version, as he will slowly begin to start sliding down it. And no, it does not matter how steep or nearly flat the slope is, he will slide down it. Despite the Wii version being playable in widescreen, all of the FMV cutscenes are in 4:3, and therefore get stretched when playing in widescreen. Meanwhile, on Xbox 360 and the PSP version, the cutscenes are in full widescreen, with the 360's version being in HD and even having surround sound. It's common knowledge that Truth or Square uses music from Battle for Bikini Bottom and the movie game. However, what some people don't know is that this game was our first exposure to BFBB's stereo music via gameplay, albeit abridged. Although this was the first to use stereo BFBB music in gameplay, it actually was BFBB itself to expose us to the stereo tracks, as that game's demo video uses the stereo version of Goo Lagoon. Speaking of music, the PSP version not only shortens the music further, it also changes where certain tracks play. Power-ups, mini-bosses, tiki challenges, and timers no longer have music. Rock Bottom plays Kelp Forest's theme, despite Rock Bottom's theme being in the files. Santa 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 plays an annoyingly short version of 12th Street Rag. The track that originally played in this level, that being Goo Lagoon, is now the Victory theme on PSP. Patbot plays the movie slide theme, and Squidbot plays the BFBB slide theme, with its console choice, that being Chum Bucket Lab, being played in the Krusty Krab level. By the way, there's an interesting tidbit about Squidbot specifically that's going to be brought up later in the video. The cannon shot is a bit broken on PSP. If you activate it in midair on console, you drop to the ground like a rock, then you get the ability to aim. Meanwhile, on PSP, you can start aiming immediately, and your descent is a lot slower. You also have a much quicker cooldown period in between shots. This allows you to skip potentially massive chunks of level, if not entire boss fights. Literally every single release of the game, including the different console versions, handles enemies in a different way, whether it be different textures, where X enemy appears, or even whether or not it has X enemy. On the Wii version, Charger Hammer's second incarnation uses the handheld version's red and green palette. Said palette was also very clearly a beta design with how often it showed up in concept art. PSP features the second incarnation of Charger Spinner quite a lot more than the first variant. In fact, you see him before the first variant. And both variations of the turret enemy on PSP use the exact same texture, thus making it much harder to identify whether or not you're facing a normal one or a V3. Said texture is also a beta texture. And lastly, the DS version just has enemies that are exclusive to it, as well as enemy tiers, including some variants of the scrapped Spinner Slammer. And because I didn't mention him in the first fact, no, we do not have a name for this guy just yet, because he was seemingly completely wiped from the console version, which is where I managed to find the enemy names to begin with. I would have just paired this with the last fact, but the way Boombot is handled across all the versions is frankly worthy of its own fact. On console, you have to ride him after attacking him, with a time limit that varies depending on where the bot was placed. Attacking again will cause them to explode prematurely. On PSP, you actually have to keep attacking it after the first time. Doing so will restart the destruction timer. Meanwhile, on DS, Boombot's basically just a reskin of the turret enemy, with the only notable difference being he actually appears less, and that he shoots a giant projectile. When the objective message pops up on console, you can actually change the message on screen. However, it seems to just be an alternate version. The cannon shot and any enemy and boss that shoots at you has different bullets depending on the version. On console, SpongeBob will shoot pink water balloons, or red when he's sponge buff, and enemies will shoot what appear to be cannonballs, which sometimes explode like water balloons. On PSP, everyone shoots yellow water balloons that sometimes explode in a fiery inferno. On DS, almost everyone shoots hockey pucks, and some enemies will shoot cannonballs with the Plankton symbol on it. Seemingly exclusive to the console version, SpongeBob has a unique animation and sound effect for when he is only at 1 health point. The giant sponge platforms are activated slightly differently on PSP. On console, you have to spray it with water for a few seconds. On the PSP version, you just gotta squirt some water on it. They also have a texture of SpongeBob's face for some reason. They also only require 1 squirt on the DS version, however they don't have the creepy SpongeBob face.
The design of the stone tiki comes from Atlantis SquarePants. As far as I know, all of the other tikis are unique to this game. Speaking of tikis, the Plankton tikis and Mr. Krab's tikis swapped functions on the console and PSP version. On the DS version, it's the Plankton tikis that exploded, while the Krab's tikis were the standard ones. And according to what we were able to find in the console version, this was evidently a last-minute switch-up, as the Plankton tikis are referred to as exploding tikis. Said exploding tikis also work differently on the DS version. If you're in the absorbed water state, you can defuse them before they get a chance to activate. This is also the only way you're getting happiness nuggets out of them. The Mrs. Puff tikis also function differently on DS. You can't jump on them at all unless you spray them with water. Afterwards, you can jump on them. You can destroy them either way, however, you likely won't want to do that, as they're pretty much exclusively used as a platform on the DS version. The Sponge Buff is incredibly fragile on console. While yes, losing it to damage applies to all versions, on console and PSP it's more of a question of what doesn't take away your buff. On both console and PSP, absorbing water removes the buff. Exclusively to console, there's sections that just decide you don't get to have buff anymore. Meanwhile, on the PSP version, it'll just straight up remove Sponge Buff when you collect literally any other power-up. Strangely, PSP actually gives Sponge Buff, well, a buff. He can completely destroy Boombot towers, which you actually need to do in the talent show level, as there are no Boombots there. Alas, where the PSP version gives Sponge Buff a buff, the DS version gives it a weakness, that being he can no longer walk on quicksand. Sponge Buff isn't activated through a power-up on the DS version. Instead, you have to get enough happiness nuggets. The bathtubs on the console version don't exactly require getting in them. You can just touch the water sticker and absorb the water. However, if you are in said state and want to refill, you do need to jump in. Jumping into quicksand while you're in your water state instantly removes it. The water state can stun enemies. I know for a fact this applies to the console version and the DS version. I do not know, however, if it applies to the PSP version. I'm going to assume yes. On every version, there are two methods of canceling out your water state. The first method is pressing a button on the ground, or you can do the second method, which is jumping in the air, then pressing a different button. Every challenge tiki has a tiny 1x1x1 default cube hidden beneath them, which you can actually see in normal gameplay in the first level. There is a mighty fine, healthy selection of beta content left over in the game, such as a language selection menu or a debug menu, which you can use to switch between levels at any time. There are also various unused items and textures left over in the game, some of which we've actually already brought up. Some of these unused items are a secret formula sprite intended to be used in the photo book for the last level, as well as the secret formula object itself being hidden inside the level. You can also find the BFBB wooden tiki texture in every level. I've been told this applies to tiki fragments, but not a whole tiki. At the start of every single level, you can find all three happiness objects under the map. Typically, you usually collect these during speedrunning. However, these are actually not the happiness objects you collect in the level itself. This being said, collecting them still counts. Despite Movie Game's music already being edited down to loop, Truth or Square edits one of these tracks down even further, specifically I'm Ready Depression. Not only was the track itself moved around to have a more energetic feeling given the fact it's a power-up theme, the intro was also taken out. incredibly strange, as there is never a point in this game where you will hear this music track for that long. The track being too long also applies to the Sandy power-up, which uses a sped-up version of the movie game's theme, as well as the version of Seaweed used for Squidward's power-up. The PSP version does not have every costume that appears on the console version. More specifically, it's missing all of the costumes that gave the characters new accessories, but not a new set of clothes. This is because every single costume on the PSP version is a basic retexture. Although every version has a side challenge, it's only the console and PSP version that brands them as Tiki challenges. Said challenges are surprisingly different depending on which version you're playing. Every single PSP Tiki challenge is a take on the console version's Spongy Survival Challenge. One version has you defeat 8 enemies and nothing more. The other version has you survive for a mere 30 seconds. Another thing that makes these versions different is how none of them take place in the level itself. Instead, they take place way out of bounds, which sometimes results in the challenge taking place in a solid color void. On PSP, each level before a boss stage will not warp you back to the hub world. Instead, they will warp you straight into the boss stage. The DS version has quite a few levels resemble what is seen in all of the footage for Happiness Squared, Truth or Square's development phases. More on this when we get to talking about the levels themselves. Enemies and the Planktobot's core alongside its shield generators can be destroyed quicker on PSP. You can do this by jumping, then using your spatula slam. Sometimes the enemy will block, but if you attack right afterwards, the cheese strat will still count. The movie game's main theme never plays at normal speed in this game, as well as the PSP version. It only plays sped up in-game and slowed down during cutscenes. The way the PSP version handles end-level cutscenes is mostly compressed FMV, where we see recordings from the Xbox 360 version. The only obvious exceptions being Bikini Bottom and Krusty Krab, and you heard me right, I pretty clearly said recordings, which leads me to the next fact. The end-level cutscenes on PSP have some strange oddities, such as being able to hear the results screen music for a split second, as well as the last two not even having music.
The shadow of a slasher! I think I just inked in my pants.
I'm gonna chop you into sponge bits!
Yes, I believe you ordered the rodent punch. Well, I've got it.
By the way, that will never happen during normal gameplay on either console version, meaning the developers at some point had to manually turn off the music. And all I can question is, why? Despite the game having a rather nice helping of cheat codes, only one of them is directly told to you, that being 6647, a black and white code, which is exactly what it sounds like. It just makes the game black and white. Speaking of codes not having any effect, the code 3141 has a different effect on every version. It has no effect on the DS version, due to none of the console codes existing. The DS version has its own way of handling cheat codes. On the Wii version, it gives you 500 happiness nuggets. On the PSP version, it gives you a whopping 50,000. The 360 version gives you a very, very impressive amount of go fuck yourself, because this code, and I'm not joking, does not exist on the 360 version. The DS version has unique names for every single level, including the hub world. For example, on the console and PSP versions, the hub world is referred to as Home Sweet Home. Meanwhile, on the DS version, it's referred to as Pineapple Hut. Discovered by Energy Drink, aka Kevin and Heavy Iron Modding, the PSP version contains earlier versions of some of these levels, and to tell you how early... Actually, you know what? No, I'm not gonna tell you. Gotta give you a reason to watch the video after all. I'll tell y'all how early these levels get later on. Technically, this was discovered by me by pure accident, and it was further researched by a user named Battlepedia Admin, or you might know him better as Hoon. Apparently, the little loading screen trivia sections on console are just straight up not needed, and you can delete them with little to no issue. Despite there being a warp trigger, the stairs have full collision and can very much be walked on. This was discovered through modding. Meanwhile, on PSP, there just isn't a warp trigger at all, and you walk up them normally. You can find happiness objects that you did not collect during your journey. This is because a couple of these are leftovers from the scrapped downtown level, which was removed rather late in the game's development. The items in question being SpongeBob's mop and this apple, which according to the files is named Apple of Shame, which in turn means this is actually the Donut of Shame from the PSP and DS versions. Discovered by Hell Inspector, over in the staircase, there is straight up a raw production background framed on the wall. It even has the production info at the bottom of the texture. Mr. Gamebot would later find out that this said background was used in the Valentine's Day episode. There's a hole in the level's geometry near the start, and it's actually really easy to go through. On the PSP version, what would normally be a 1-up right before the jellyfish cage is now a life chest, similar to the ones in the hub world. The PSP version has a little island right before the first jelly slide. Said island is not present in the console version. The PSP version also has a hole in the geometry, albeit in a different location. It's inside one of the tunnels during the cave section, and be warned, if you fall through, you're not getting out unless you quit and reset the level. I actually tried getting footage of me going through this hole, but holy crap, it is way harder than going through it on console. There is a mermaid ship mast that cannot be seen through normal means. It's possible this is also on the PSP version, but we have no way of checking, at least not that I'm aware of. Every single time you see Wee Yellow stalking you throughout the level, it isn't just a tiny little piece with a shadow texture, it's straight up his entire model. Considering you only see his scope, it's possible that seeing his shadow is a glitch. It would also explain why the shadow is T-posing. This is one of many levels where an enemy cutscene will just straight up show you the wrong enemy. In this level's instance, the charger spinner is represented by the propeller hand variant, but not only that, it's the DS exclusive orange and blue design. It also has a completely black eye, a trait exclusive to the PSP enemies. Another weird fact about this appearance of the charger spinner is on the PSP version, every enemy in this section is a charger spinner, but more specifically, it's the propeller hand version. However, it has a red and blue palette instead. Strangely, the standard anger version also appears in this level, but not only is it one single time, it's actually after you're introduced to the propeller hand variants. And one other thing about the charger spinners on the PSP version, all of them behave the exact same way, meaning all of them will spin and have a vortex that sucks you in. Meanwhile, on console, neither of them do this and behave pretty differently. Destroying every single kelp trap at the end of the level on console will reward you with a 5-up. Completing the spongy survival here appears to full-on erase most of the enemies in the area. Wee Yellow is different on all 3 versions. On console, you wait for him to spin, then slam a few times. On PSP, you wait for him to finish his first spin, hit him, let him slam, then hit the target. Wait for the spin afterwards, then repeat. Meanwhile, on the DS version, you go up to him whenever you want, hit him, wait for him to slam, then hit the target. There's some other differences with the fight, too. On console, defeating Wee Yellow will raise Sandy and the clam she's been fighting out of the goo. Then you collect the happiness object. On PSP, she's waiting for you on this ledge that's actually completely inaccessible on console. On the DS version, the fight's just in a different location altogether. It's right outside her tree dome. Another major difference with Wii Yellow actually involves SpongeBob himself. On the console version, damage is doubled in this mini-boss when you're playing as SpongeBob. The PSP version receives no such damage boost at all, and the DS version just straight up doesn't let you play as SpongeBob in any boss fight. This level has at least 2 radically different versions that existed during the Happiness Squared days of this game's development. One set deep in the forest, and one that's at the forest's edge. However, the latter might actually be Karate with Sandy, as that level taking place in Karate Island may have actually been a last-minute change. In the files, Wii Yellow has a completely different name. There, he's referred to as Keith. Both this level and Kara-Tay with Sandy are some of the only levels on PSP to have radically different visuals. The levels appear to take place in a rather gloomy atmosphere. Meanwhile, on the DS version, both of them take place during a nice sunny day. There is a spot where you can instantly respawn 2 robots. This fact will also apply to the Krusty Krab level later on. Despite what various wikis and YouTube videos may tell you, no, the name of this level on PSP is not Squidward's talent show. It is just called Bikini Bottom. The Tiki Challenge in the scrapped console version are activated by hit, unlike usual Tikis where you have to press minus or select. This is exactly how you activate challenge tikis on the PSP version. The spin wheels in this level also behave exactly like their handheld counterparts. You have to spin them multiple times. The same also applies to the Krusty Krab level. The checkpoints in the scrapped console version are not invisible unlike every other level, and are represented by the checkpoint horns featured in the DS version. Despite not being collectible, both the Donut of Shame and Squidward's clarinet do exist in this scrapped console version. Like any other level, they can be found under the map. Well, I said earlier that the PSP version has some pretty early versions of some of the levels. Now let me tell you how early some of those are. Energy Drink, aka Kevin, discovered that we full-on have Happiness Squared levels. And now that we have this information, we can actually get a good look at this very early version of the level. And color me shocked to find out that this is very much built off of downtown streets from Battle for Bikini Bottom. If it weren't for the textures and very minor changes in geometry, this would have been the exact same level. As shown via concept art, the fight was originally supposed to have a crane carrying some crates, like in the DS version. However, it was removed last minute. Despite this, the platform holding said crates can be seen out in the distance. Some of the crowd members are repurposed thugs from movie game's bubble-blowing Baby Hunt. The handheld versions of this fight have some differences. On PSP, Patbot destroys the trucks before spawning in the enemies. Some of said enemies are not supposed to appear until much later in the game, and the FMV of Patbot's defeat plays after obtaining the happiness object. Meanwhile, on the DS version, the fight is just completely different and takes place during the day. Patbot also never explodes, he just gets sad at his loss and flies away. Another big difference, again, involves SpongeBob. On console, SpongeBuff is simply optional and speeds up the fight. On PSP, however, SpongeBuff is 100% required to simply damage Patbot, and it also speeds up the fight. By the way, props to the PSP version of this fight. I wasn't actually expecting this version to do something better, but I really like the scaling of the fight here. It really shows how gargantuan this robot double of Patrick actually is. On the console version, the second incarnation of Charger Hammer was nearly in this fight instead of the standard version. Despite this level being very clearly a return to Jellyfish Fields, as is confirmed on the PSP version, the console version claims this to be Goo Lagoon. There is a life pickup that is super high in the air and is unobtainable near the start of the level. On the PSP version, you have to jump across platforms to make it onto the bus. Like in the first Jellyfish Fields level, there's a very easy to access hole in the console version. If you're curious, it's at the third Mr. Krabs encounter. This is the first level on the console version to introduce the tougher yellow slammers and spinners. These enemy variants take over the role of the standard enemy for the remainder of the game, with the final boss being a semi-exception. It's also possible these tougher variants were a late addition, as not only do they not appear in beta screenshots, they also don't exist on the handheld variants. During the third Mr. Krabs encounter, SpongeBob is playing an animation that you can't see unless you skip the cutscene. You also can't move while this animation is playing. The Happiness Extreme and Squidward power-ups swap placements on the console and PSP versions. The PSP version features an unused enemy. Said enemy only appears to be at the end of this one single level, and it's possible they weren't supposed to be here at all as their lighting is broken. Meanwhile, this enemy appears everywhere on the DS version and even gets a second variant. Said second variant appears to show up in Happiness Squared footage and screenshots. This is the only level that either version of Turret appears in. After this level, they are replaced by Boombot, who also rarely appears. Turret appears more on the PSP and DS version, and shows up as early as Jellyfish Fields on DS. Over by the third Krabs encounter, you can actually explore an area on PSP that you normally can't reach on console. There awaits you some happiness nuggets as well as a life pickup. You can also just straight up fall through the map here, so be careful. This is the only level to have a different story depending on the version. Console and PSP is a retelling of SpongeBob becoming a fry cook. The DS version, on the other hand, is him preparing for the Fry Cook games. Squidward Claws on the PSP version has a strange ghostly effect applied to him. The second time you see Squidward in this level, he's normally inaccessible. Meanwhile, on the PSP version, you can actually walk around the area he's in. During the section where we get a teaser of Tenderizer, you can actually see two of them placed on top of each other. On the PSP version, this teaser is just a screenshot of the arena. I will give them credit though, they weren't lazy and just fetched a screenshot of the console arena. That is the PSP arena. There is a Sandy power-up that is completely unusable and a lone ice block. Through the power of the Colin editor, I've discovered that the ice block is supposed to be surrounding the power-up, implying that it would drop alongside the enemies. In fact, you can actually see the block dropping prematurely if you die during the ambush. The hard hammer enemies have the wrong hammer on the Wii version. They're supposed to have a frosty version of their new fancy yellow hammer. However, they instead use a frosty version of the standard brown hammer. There is a version of Tenderizer's texture that completely lacks the freezer frost. Tenderizer has a very rare attack where he will aim at the ceiling, causing chunks of ice to rain down. There are two ways to damage Tenderizer. There's the way the game wants you to hit him, and deflecting his orange projectiles back at him. In the files, Tenderizer is referred to as Jose. The Tenderizer fight, like all of the other bosses, has differences on the handheld counterparts. On PSP, it's completely random when he'll let you attack. I just happened to get lucky in my background footage here. Meanwhile, on DS, he and Demento completely switch places. His fight on DS is also completely different. You simply have to wait for him to expose his target after he moves around for a bit. Oh yeah, he can move on the DS version.
He's got chicken legs.
Yes, chicken legs.
Unlike the console version, the PSP version features the return of the turret enemy. The darkness effect is pretty much exclusive to the console version. The effect simply doesn't exist at all on the PSP version, and it's only for a mere section in the DS version. The section may have also been added in last minute, as there's no early screenshots of this level with the gimmick. When deleting the darkness effect on console, you can find some oddities hidden just barely away from the main area. There are 3 Plankton tikis that function completely differently from the others. They always smile at you, but not an evil smile like the other ones. They also don't go down in one hit and surprisingly take multiple, with each hit giving you a happiness nugget. These tikis, interestingly, were everywhere in the scrapped Krusty Krab level. The section that features the prawn cameo has dialogue for Plankton that is seemingly exclusive to the PSP version.
Oh! The evil Mermaid! Luckily, he's been frozen in tartar sauce since 1964, and this world's a safer place, thanks to Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Look at the shrimp. Stop!
Prawn! So this is where you've been hanging out. We missed you at the Evil Anonymous meeting.
The ladder for the Mermaid computer uses a texture for a scrapped coin collectible. This level has quite the number of differences across the 3 main versions, primarily in visuals and audio. The music stands out amongst any other track on the PSP version. Not only is the track different, but it's also the only track to not be shortened. The track in question is the full uncut stereo version of BFBB's Slide theme, a whopping 11 years before Sheriff the Great would help manage to get this uncut version public. Like the fight against Patbot, this fight has quite a number of differences across the versions. On PSP, the level is very gray with what appears to be the lighting from the Santa level. Meanwhile, on DS, the level takes place in a freezer, which resembles a piece of some concept art. In terms of the fight itself, it's exactly like Patbot. SpongeBob is required on PSP, and the fight is completely different on DS. The animation of Squidbot sinking into the goo, the one that plays during the outro cutscene, actually plays in-game on PSP. Very odd, because in the FMV afterwards we see the exact same thing happen. The third phase of Squidbot can be very easily skipped on both console and PSP. On console, there's just barely enough time to catch a ride on the platform before it moves. Meanwhile, on PSP, the thing doesn't even move. As for actually skipping the phase, touching the gumwad cancels out all of his attacks. This level's hub world conversation is out of order. In fact, the conversation doesn't even finish before panning to the photo book, with SpongeBob actually getting cut off.
The hash-slinging slasher! Ah! Ah!
Hand-slinging slasher!
Strangely enough, this is actually fixed on PSP.
The hash-slinging slasher! Ah!
Hand-slinging slasher! Ow!
Ah!
Both the acid and lava are insta-kill on console, but not on PSP or DS. Dying to these hazards on console also presents you with a, oh my, that's pretty grim. Upon entering the monster section, you're greeted with Squidward in his boat. Meanwhile, on PSP, he's sitting down on the floor in fear. On PSP, Squidward appears during the first chasm section. However, you'll notice it's only his boat. That's because if you look really carefully, he just falls through the damn thing.
To Davy Jones with you!
The second SpongeBuff power-up found in the level does not respawn after collecting. If I had to guess for why it actually doesn't in this specific instance, it's likely because here on console, you have no way of coming back to this. This is the first console SpongeBob game to have a model of the road monster featured in the SpongeBob movie. Not even the game literally based on the movie has this monster.
The poor guy didn't even appear in the cutscene.
The lava fall right beside the final Boombot tower has a debug trigger that will end the level. Meanwhile, on the PSP version, there's a cave that contains a 3-up. The final ambush section is completely different on PSP. Instead of the previous area sinking into the lava, I wrote lave here, a wooden structure just falls on top of it, followed by some bots. Surprisingly, on the console version, this area has a different sky dome. It isn't just the default Jellyfish Fields one. All of the SpongeBob power-ups are hidden, except for one, that being the second one. The only reason it isn't hidden is because it's needed for a Tiki challenge. The Ship Crate segment does not exist on PSP. Instead, you activate some rock platforms that eventually go away after a timer runs out. Some of them lead you to some extra goodies. The first Patrick power-up can be taken away right before the Jellyfish section. However, this only happens once. Any attempt to recreate it will prove fruitless. The first Jellyfish section does not exist on PSP. Instead, it has rock structures you hop across, which actually makes it closer to concept art. Interestingly here too, SpongeBob has dialogue exclusive to this version that, of all things to references the Looney Tunes.
Be very quiet. I'm hunting squirrel.
Hate to burst your bubble, SpongeBob, but I think Sandy's hunting you.
The area surrounding the final Tiki challenge will have no breakable items when traveling to it normally. However, warping to it via the box will allow the items to spawn in. Speaking of the teleport box, it's possible to soft lock yourself with this one. If you jump into it right when the Sandy cinematic begins, you will be stuck in the cinematic state. Demento is the only mini-boss that, for the most part, functions the exact same across all three versions, with the only real difference being location on DS. In the files, Demento is named Lyle, after Heavy Iron's CEO, that being Lyle Hawk. This applies the other two were also named after Heavy Iron employees. It is impossible to access Demento as SpongeBob without using SpongeBob mode, which can be activated via the cheat menu. You can still see Sandy standing on top of the platform during the end level cutscene. Now, I did mention earlier that the second Kelp Forest level, being Karate Island, may have been a last-minute change. However, as evident by the concept art I've shown, it's more than likely not true. It's very likely this was always planned to be Karate Island. However, I still have my doubts. First of all, the level on PSP is just straight up called Kelp Forest 2. As for the level on DS, there are no Karate Island elements here. This is just a straight up revisit to Kelp Forest. As I mentioned earlier, there was a talent show fact that also applied to this level. Despite what various wikis and YouTube videos may tell you, no, this level's name on PSP is not Ambush at the Krusty Krab or just Ambush at Krusty Krab. The level is just called Krusty Krab. Much unlike the talent show level, the console and PSP versions differ greatly. On PSP, you're going to different variants of the Krusty Krab referencing various episodes, while on the scrapped console version, that is technically what was still happening. We found out we were actually going back in time, seeing what led to the Krusty Krab looking like the way it did during each segment. We also saw a section that was absolutely recreated for the DS version. You may have noticed that the dialogue for entering this level is super similar to the dialogue for the console version when you begin the final boss. That's because the dialogue was actually meant for this level. Interestingly, the dialogue does not actually match the PSP exclusive audio. Said audio is an alternate take of what would later end up being used in the console game. This audio references the episodes SB-129 and, surprisingly, Truth or Square itself.
Full of great memories. I remember when I got my first promotion, and when Squidward found the time machine, and when we were trapped in the freezer, and...
During the intro cutscene, specifically the widescreen version on 360, there is a building that was not lit correctly. If you let Planktobot go ahead of you, the game will eventually just kill you. This is likely to prevent any soft locking, as Planktobot does destroy some of the level later on. The ground uses the wrong texture on console. This is strangely fixed on the PSP version. On PSP, Planktobot Phase 3 is a mini boss rush, like the Krusty Krab level before it, only it is just Yellow and Demento. Strangely, this appears to have been nearly the case on console, as Demento's texture appears to be in the console version's files. The final boss is, no shocker, stingy with its usage of SpongeBob. None of them respawn, and it's outright removed from you when you enter the core area for the final time. However, the area just gives you another one anyway. Planktobot has a health meter on the handheld versions. Meanwhile, on console, the health is represented by the coloring of the core's shielding. Like Patbot, the Planktobot has differences on the handheld versions outside of the fight being completely different, such as the fight taking place during the day and the core section actually being a completely separate fight, even down to it having its own health meter. Meanwhile, on PSP, entering the Planktobot is a bit different. On console, you attack the fist, then the entry point immediately opens up. Meanwhile, on PSP, you let him slam his fist a few times, then the entry point automatically opens. Said entry point also has a messed up texture. The gap right beside the giant springboard in the third outside section can actually hurt you if you go across it too early. You have to stay there and wait for the building to fall. The PSP version is the only major boss to outright not give you any SpongeBob power-ups. The core's force field on PSP, as well as the energy beams on the floor, can actually hurt you. Bit of a weak one to end on, I'm well aware, but the credits on both the 360 and Wii versions are different in length. Well, I mean, I did warn you, this was a bit of a boring one to end on. Wait, what do you mean that was only 149? The PSP version of this fight handles enemies in a very, very strange way. As I mentioned, Phase 3 just replaces all the enemies altogether with yet another mini-boss rush, and this time they leave out Jose! Why would you leave out Jose? Jose is the shit, man! If that wasn't enough, you can straight up ignore Demento, and you can make Wee Yellow kill himself! That boy just sent himself into the plane of death!
David Jones with you.
On top of that, some of the sections with the normal enemies, I swear, are super bugged. While the outside sections appear to be perfectly fine, the inside section is very much not okay, because if you go to this one generator here during Phase 1, there's a very high chance you can get blindsided by El Chunker Spinner. And if that wasn't enough, upon entering this core section for the first time, you can straight up skip the fight by doing the cannon shot jump. This footage is not doctored. You can skip the final boss.
I love this game.
And there we have it. That is 150 facts about SpongeBob's Truth or Square. All three versions, mostly console PSP, but all three versions. Technically, 4. Folks, I will not lie when I say it took a while to make this video. And it's not even because this video was so massive. In fact, it was actually shorter than I thought it was going to be. So much got in the way of making this video, to a point where I almost thought about canceling it. Because again, so much shit got in the way. But if you made it to the end here, I'm really happy that you did. But before you go away, I got a quick little announcement in case you guys did not watch the update video about a week ago. I have a Patreon now. Now before I tell you guys what the tiers of this Patreon is, because there is more than one tier, allow me to tell you what all you guys are going to get out of it, other than supporting me. First of all, early access to my videos as well as my art, because yes, I'm going to start posting my art publicly now, as I'm finally capable of doing art digitally, which means I am more than capable now of having my art look the best it can be. Secondly, for those early access videos, they will be ad-free. You guys are already paying to see them a week early, so I feel it'd be really shitty to have them monetized and in turn give you ads. And as a little extra bonus, there's also going to be high quality downloads, because simply put, this website's pretty scary right now. And hey, you never know, you might want to watch some Koopy Lemon Eater when you don't have Wi-Fi and have it be a true offline download that you can keep forever. Back on the art side of things, as I mentioned earlier, early access, but they will also be in the highest quality possible. When the art does eventually go to a free service, it will be compressed. However, there's one more art thing you guys might be interested in, especially if you're a YouTube creator. That being the art being split up into individual assets. So example, at the time of me making this video, I'm pretty sure I'll be working on a digital version of the Battle for Bikini Bottom cover art I made. The split up assets would be just the background, just SpongeBob, just Patrick, etc. You guys can use all those split up assets for wallpapers, YouTube thumbnails, maybe just some clip art and videos, Discord emojis, profile pictures, anything you want, as long as you credit me. If you want access to all of that, it's just $5 a month.
I also forgot to mention that the $5 tier will have a 7-day free trial period.
If you just want to support me, then it's only going to be $1 a month. And because I don't like people being left empty-handed, you guys will at least get early access and high-quality downloads for the art, not the assets. Everything except the high-quality art downloads and early access to the art will be locked behind the $5 tier. But, again, not technically, because everything on there is going public for free anyways, so it's only the art assets that you guys are paying for. And of course, end of the video shoutouts, whether it be through my actual voice or on-screen text. Considering how small I am though, it's probably more than likely I'll have just a small amount of people and in turn use my voice. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this not as big of a video as I thought it would be, and I hope some of you subscribe to the Patreon. With that being said, this is the Koopa Eliminator, signing out, and here's to a new era.